I'm so glad you could join me. Today, I thought we would take another look at this 1947 Girl Scout Handbook. If you'd like to, you can check out my previous video on this book. It is a green textured binding, and there's some worn gold embossing of a clover on the front and the lettering of the Girl Scout Handbook. It's rather small, just a little bit bigger than my hand, barely. And in the front, we have the name of a former Girl Scout who owned this book. And then throughout the map, we have places where there were Girl Scout troops in 1947 all around the world. There's a little compass in the middle. And then there are written names of troop leaders and treasurers and scribes in the front. We have a contents. I thought we'd pick up in about the middle, which is where I left off last time. So here we have a drawing, and it says, how many different kinds of nature can you find in this picture? In the background, we see a city skyscape. You can see an outline of the tall buildings. And then it looks like the Girl Scouts are here in a park. There's trees. And there's what looks to be maybe a lake over here. And there are some people fishing. And on this side of this path that winds through the park, there is a fountain that a couple of the girls are looking at because there's a frog sitting on the edge of the fountain. Then we have birds picking up seed off the sidewalk. Here's a little squirrel. And then one of the Girl Scouts has a book or ledger in her hands. It's another small creature, maybe a squirrel here. Another bird. Clouds in the sky. Chapter 14, Nature. How to begin. Here we are in the field of nature, and there's no end to it. Birds, trees, flowers, inkwells, pencils, chalk, stars, rain, apples. They are all nature or the products of nature. In the very beginning, we might just as well make up our minds that we are never never going to know all there is to know on this subject. I would say that's wise. We might just as well remember that it is not so much knowing the names of all the animals and plants we see, as it is discovering how they live, or, as in the case of chalk and ink wells, what they were in the first place. For instance, if you know an earthworm when you see it and call it by name, that is one thing. But do you know what it eats? Where it lays its eggs? Whether or not it has eyelashes or even eyes? In the case of a pencil, of what is the lead made? What tree furnished the wood? Have you ever seen it? What kind of metal holds the eraser in place? Where do rubber trees grow? Ever seen one? Ever seen any of its close relatives? These are just a few of the common things it is possible to know about two very common things, a pencil and an earthworm. Not so different in shape, but very different otherwise. If you live in the country, you will of course know that there is plenty of nature to be seen if you will just take the time to look around. If you live in the city, there are such things as the fruits and vegetables you eat every day, the things in the flower shops, pet shops, fish markets, the plants in people's windows, and in window boxes, the trees and birds in the city parks, the weeds in vacant lots, and so on. We need not be too fussy and think we have to see birds of paradise and orchids. A little sparrow eating dandelion seeds in a vacant lot is perfectly good nature. How will you go about seeing nature? First of all, open your eyes and, we might say, your ears, and let the brain function as well. Do you need a lot of books and notebooks and pens and pencils to see things? No. Use only as many of these things as you actually need to help you understand and enjoy what you see. Many people get so busy copying some nature facts out of one book and into another that they never see the real object they are writing about. And what fun is that? It is much better to look and listen, and then, if you want to, write down the things you remember just to see how much you can recall. Are you a rambler? I would dare say I am. A rambler is a person who explores around, not sticking to the beaten paths, and who takes the time to enjoy things as he goes along. Most people, when they are in the out of doors, do not look only at birds or trees or insects or flowers, but are interested in all the things they see. They like to learn a little about each. They also like to learn the way some things depend upon others for their growth. For instance, a tree must have sun, water, and a certain type of soil. A rabbit must have water and green things to eat, and some patch of bushes must be his shelter. A bird may need a certain type of berry and will be found only where that berry is found. A rambler will notice that certain types of plants, birds, mammals, and insects are usually found in one type of place. For instance, in a swamp will be mosquitoes, frogs, water turtles, birds that nest in swamp grasses, long-legged birds that can wade, and so on. The study of the relationships of animals and plants is called ecology. A rambler will discover that nature rotates plant growth as a farmer rotates his crops. If a piece of land is burned over or lumbered, trees, flowers, and ferns, different from those that were there before, will come up. The study of this is called oecology. A person who rambles through the woods often likes to collect and take home mementos of the walk. It does no harm to collect some things such as pebbles, shells, leaves of trees and shrubs. There are some things you must not collect, such as rare plants or their blossoms, birds' eggs, rare insects. Perhaps it is even more fun to make collections of pictures, sketches, and your own memories. The names of things. As you know, everything in nature has a scientific name, and some have, in addition, common names. A name is common only because it is familiar. If you find a scientific name with which you are not familiar, do not be disturbed. There are plenty of scientific names you do know and use very often, such as geranium, nasturtium, flax, hippopotamus, vireo, sassafras, catalpa, and lynx. The Three Kingdoms. You probably know that there are three kingdoms in the world, namely plant, animal, and mineral. The mineral kingdom includes things that do not have life and therefore do not grow. They are called inorganic. Members of the plant and animal kingdoms do have life and therefore grow. They are called organic. One great difference between the animal and plant kingdoms is the fact that animals move of their own volition and plants do not. When a person says a tree is a plant, that is right, because it grows but cannot move itself from place to place. If you should hear that an insect is an animal, that is right too, because it has life and can move of its own volition. Most people, when they speak of animals, really mean mammals, such as the cat, dog, wolf, skunk, and others you could mention. Mammals are one class of animal. How to tell a simple leaf on the left from a compound leaf on the right. A simple leaf, this is the whole leaf coming off of the stem. And this is next year's buds, so when they come out in the spring. For a compound leaf, there are multiple little leaves, as we would think of them, but this is the whole leaf because there's more than one attached to the stem coming off the branch. Trees are easy to get acquainted with because they stay in one place, winter and summer. When trying to become acquainted with a tree, notice the leaves, bark, buds, blossoms, and the general shape of the tree. All but the leaves and blossoms are there all the time, in all parts of the country. Trees are known as deciduous or as evergreen. Deciduous trees shed all their leaves at once. Evergreens shed their leaves or needles from time to time. Here we have a cross-section of a tree. The very center is called the pith. Around the pith, but in tighter circles, is called the heartwood. Next up is called the springwood, and that would be the lighter bands in the tree growth. The darker bands are called the summerwood, so that would be when it's actively growing over the summer. From the heartwood out to the bark is called the sapwood, which I guess if you're going to tap a maple tree, you would tap into the sapwood area. Next to the bark is the cambium layer, and then the outer layer is the bark. Examples of deciduous trees are oak. So they have kind of these pointy, fringed leaves. They're rather narrow. Maple are broad, and some of them have kind of the pointed edges. They often give off the helicopter seeds. A sweet gum looks like a 5-pointed star. A birch leaf looks like a teardrop. And a cherry tree is just an oval with a point. Evergreen, you have a pine which has long, straight needles. You have a spruce, which are more compact needles on each little tiny branch. And then a hemlock are thicker, shorter needles as well. This difference is well marked in cold and temperate climates, meaning the difference between having leaves and having needles. In the tropics, it is not always so well marked. All trees have flowers and all trees have seeds. Look at the picture of a simple flower on this page and note the stamens and pistil. The stamens carry the pollen and the pistil receives the pollen. So on the flower in the very center is the pistil. Anything that's around that very center are stamens. So the stamens have the pollen that bees come to get, and the pistil is what receives the pollen. And on the pistil there's the stigma, which is the end, the style, which is what would be the stem, and then the ovary and ovules are down below. On the stamen you have the anther, which is on the end, the pollen that comes off of that, and then the stem is called a filament. Some plants have stamens and pistil in the same flower. Some have them on separate flowers on the same plant, and some have them on separate plants. For example, the tulip tree is one that has stamens and pistil in the same flower. The oak has the stamens in one kind of flower and the pistils in another, but on the same tree. The holly has the pistillate female flowers on one tree and the staminate male flowers on another tree. There are several different types of trees that have a male and a female version. You will find that the leaf buds on various kinds of trees are very different. Some people can identify a tree by the buds alone. Leaf scars are the little scars left on the twigs where the leaves were attached the year before. Many of them resemble faces. There are two types of tree leaves, simple and compound. A simple leaf is one leaf. A compound leaf is a leaf that is made up of several leaflets, which is the picture we looked at on the previous area. In most parts of our country, being the United States, many of the trees are without leaves throughout the winter. For this reason, it's useful to learn to identify as many trees as possible by their bark. As for the shapes of trees, some are tall and thin, as is the case with certain poplars. Some grow branches close to the ground, which gives the tree the appearance of having on a long skirt. The arborvitae is such a tree. The American elm is shaped like a goblet. The white pine is the most angular of all the evergreens, with the exception of those growing in certain locations where the wind and weather affect their shape as they grow. So here we have an example of the leafing those growth marks go all the way around. You see those, you can see where it grew the previous year. And then where it branched off for a new is the last year's. You have the flower scar here. The flower came off. The leaf scar on the side where there was leaves previous. And then you have the bud of the tree. A tree that grows crowded among other trees rarely shows its characteristic shape. To learn the shape of trees, try to pick those that you find growing in fairly open spaces. Most people like to include some of the shrubs in their study of trees. A shrub is also a woody plant, but it is smaller than a tree and has many main stems instead of one stem or trunk like a tree. It's interesting to raise different kinds of trees from seed, and it is not as difficult as many people believe. Most of the common trees can be raised quite easily. They will come up in your terrarium or in a flower pot. So here we have a map. And native lands of flowers that have made themselves at home in this country. So we have the century plant from tropical America, which looks like they're making that as South America. Cosmos from Mexico. Calceolaria from Mexico to Chile. Petunia from South America. Begonia from Brazil. Calla lily from South Africa. Gladiola, also from South Africa. And geranium from South Africa. Tulip from Armenia and Persia. China aster, China. Japanese barberry. Bachelor's button, Southeast Europe. Calendula from South Europe. Daffodil from Northern Europe. Snapdragon from the Mediterranean. And the poinsettia, this South Carolina, but I'm pretty sure poinsettias come from Mexico. Cultivated flowers. Not everyone can have a garden, but almost anyone can learn interesting things about cultivated flowers. Perhaps there are no gardens near where you live, but there may be flower shops. And what do we see exhibited there if not cultivated flowers? To almost every home in this country comes a potted plant or a branch of flowers at some time during the year. It's useful to know how to take care of them. There are a great many different kinds of potted plants, so it's a good idea to ask the florist how to take care of any that are sent to your house. For instance, if the plant is a cyclamen, it must be kept moist, have some sun, and be watered only from the bottom. Cut flowers should have their stems cut every day and be kept in fresh water. At night, put them in a pail or deep kettle of water right up to their blossoms and put them in a cool place. It's best to cut the stems of flowers on a slant and with a knife. All flowering plants have seeds, but they are not all propagated from seeds. Some are propagated from bulbs, like the Easter lily. Some from seeds, such as pansies. Some from corms, such as the begonias. Some from roots or cuttings, like ivies. Some throw out new plants from the parent plant, like the strawberry begonia. All cultivated plants grow wild in some part of the world. In some cases, horticulturists have improved the original form by careful breeding and crossbreeding. The carnation is one of these. Some cultivated plants have not been changed in any way. The jade plant is one of these. It is useful to know from what part of the world your cultivated plants came, because it helps us to know what kind of care they need. A plant that grows wild in a swamp in the tropics needs quite different care than one that grows wild on the side of a mountain. So here they have 4 windows and the directions that they face. For example, in the east-facing window, they say you can grow an inch plant, Kenilworth ivy, spider plant, a strawberry begonia, a jade plant, and a pick-a-back plant. In the north-facing window, asparagus fern, here, ivy, a holly fern, philodendron, and a sword fern. In the west-facing window, you have grape ivy, African violet, finger fern, sansevieria, and a rex begonia. In south-facing window, have a geranium, a begonia, petunia, cigar plant, a fuchsia, impatiens, and a Christmas cactus. Well, they would clutch their pearls to their breast if they knew all the ones I grow in my west-facing window. If you do have houseplants, look after them every day to see whether they need water. About once a week, stir up the topsoil with a fork and watch them carefully for pests, such as plant lice, red mites, and mealy bugs. A plant responds very quickly to kind and understanding treatment, just as human beings do, and returns us in beauty all we give it in service. Don't stop with flowers in the house. Try a window box out of doors. No matter how tiny your yard, find a little space where you can try growing flowers. Some people keep an earthworm living in every potted plant they have. Earthworms help to fertilize the soil, and by making tunnels to live in, they keep good drainage in a pot. I had never thought of that. If you just like to grow things, plant such things as birdseed, orange seeds, beans and peas, onions and potatoes. A slice from the top of a carrot with about an inch of the green left on. Just plant them in a pot with any kind of garden soil. You can make cuttings from many different kinds of plants. Ivy, coleus, begonia, and geranium are especially easy to grow from cuttings. On page 251 is a picture that shows you how to make a cutting. It is nice to be able to give your friends plants that you have raised from a cutting. Try raising a fern of some kind and watch for the brown spore cases. They are the flowers of a fern. Some ferns have them on separate stalks. Most of those grown in houses have them on the backs of the fronds, their leaves. Some kinds of ferns put out runners that will start new plants if the ends are pushed into the ground. So here you have an ivy plant, and it shows that you take a cutting off the end, put it into some water until it roots, and then transfer it to a pot. Wild plants. Wild plants have been used for food and medicine for many, many years. Do you know what common plants in your neighborhood were used by the early settlers and Indians? How many of them do you suppose are still used today in medicine? There is no particular reason why you should confine your interest to what we call flowering plants, such as dandelions and orchids, because the ferns, mosses, mushrooms, and seaweeds are also worth knowing. The plant kingdom is a large one. It's useful to know the parts of the flower, which we covered a little bit ago. The shape and number of the petals, the shape and number of seeds in the ovary, the shape, number, and arrangement of the pistils and stamens are all kinds of information needed in order to know by looking at a flower the plant family to which it belongs. This is easy with some plant families, but not with others. Oh, here it talks about poisonous plants, such as poison ivy. I wasn't very good at identifying it when I was younger, but now I can see it from several feet away because I've had it too many times. Poison oak, which I think is a little bit tougher to identify, and poison sumac, and then another type of poisonous wood, because there are other plants that can cause rashes. Dogs and cats. Let's read what they have to say about this in 1947. Dogs and cats are the commonest household pets in the world. They have been household pets for thousands of years. All the different breeds of dogs and cats have been developed by man from a few wild ancestors. Cats belong to the same family as lions, jaguars, leopards, and tigers. Dogs belong to the same family as wolves and foxes. The members of the entire cat family are lone hunters. They stalk their prey on silent feet and jump with sureness and speed. Look at a cat. The claws are sharp and sheathed. This sheathing serves two purposes. 1. The claws are kept sharp because they are sheathed. 2. The cat walks only on the cushions of the feet so it can walk silently. The entire dog family pursues its prey, runs it down. Look at a dog. The claws are unsheathed and serve the same purpose as spikes in sport shoes, to keep from skidding and to add speed. When the dog walks around the house, you can hear his claws on the floor. Notice the paw marks of the cat and dog in snow or moist earth. The dog's paw prints always show at least 2 of the claws. The cat's paw prints do not show any claws. I'm just going to make an observation here really quickly that it's interesting that this book from 1947, when they're referring to things, almost exclusively refer to it as a he, even though this is a Girl Scout book. There are a few very simple things to remember when you have either of these animals as a pet. Their simple needs are almost the same as yours. That is, regular exercise, nourishing food served regularly, bodily cleanliness, proper elimination, and kind treatment. The natural food of both animals is meat, but must be supplemented by vegetables and cereals. Both dogs and cats need exercise to keep the body in good condition. If you have a dog in a community where he has to be kept on leash, you and the dog can go together for your daily exercise. It's important that a dog's or cat's meal be given it regularly, as near the same time each day as possible. This helps it to form regular habits of elimination. It's a good idea to exercise the dog before feeding. This stimulates the appetite. An animal likes to rest and sleep after a good meal. Keep your dog and cat as clean as possible. This does not mean a lot of bathing, but does mean a brushing every day. It's not a good idea to bathe dogs too often because it destroys the oil in their skin and takes the luster from the fur. It's unfair to have a cat or dog and not treat it as kindly as you know how. One of the most kindly things you can do is to try patiently to understand your pets and teach them to understand you. Screaming at an animal or whipping him is not the way to go about getting him to understand you. Dogs and cats have sensitive ears and sensitive feelings. Kindliness and patience are the only ways to establish understanding with animals or with human beings. If a dog or cat does something you do not want it to do, use the same word always in correcting it. It doesn't matter what the word is, be it no, stop, or don't, but use the same word. If a dog or cat does something you want it to do, be sure to compliment it. Good dog, good cat, or just the word good becomes music to his ears, and it's associate the thing you want it to do with a pat on the head. Do not reward dogs and cats with bits of food. Remember that a dog or cat has a very limited vocabulary. If you can get yours to understand and respond to 10 words, you are doing very well. And I think now we know that especially dogs can respond to more words than that. Give your dog or cat its own place in which to sleep, its own basket or box or piece of rug. It likes its own place. I'm changing some of the yeast its. Puppies and kittens can be easily housebroken by feeding them regularly and taking them out of doors within about 10 minutes, or taking them to the special box or place you have provided. Do not whip them or rub their noses in their mistakes. They do not understand, but say bad or naughty or no, and take them outdoors or to their box. They will learn very fast. If you correct a dog or cat for something like jumping on a chair or chewing what he shouldn't chew, correct him each time he does it. If you correct it only now and then, he will never learn. Be kind, be firm, remember to compliment good behavior. Feed them regularly, exercise them regularly, and you and your dog or cat will learn to understand each other. Talks about birds. Here's some examples. Baltimore Oriole nest, kind of a hanging bag. A redstart uses the crook of branches to make a conical looking nest. Barn swallows kind of find a flat spot to put things in. A red-winged blackbird ties its nest to branches as well. A flicker usually finds a hole. A bank swallow finds a crevice in either dirt or rock to build its nest. Hummingbird has tiny little nests that they attach to branches. And a field sparrow makes theirs in leaves on the ground. And here we have some prints of wildlife. So we have a weasel. And you can see, I'm guessing this is the tail that drags. You have a mink that has 4 prints muskrat, the small front feet, and the larger back feet. Then we have the dog, its pads and its claw marks, a deer mouse, woodchuck, which I didn't realize they had such big prints, but theirs look a lot like a spaced out dog. The claws. The chipmunk looks like little paws or hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 fingers on the back, and it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 on the front. And the red squirrels are even smaller. The raccoon, their hind foot is larger than the front foot, and they're very, I don't know, when I see them I think of like a werewolf print. And then the right forefront, that they use their little hands to pick things up. And then a skunk, oh my goodness, looks very similar to a human's footprint. Interesting. See, they talk about insects, such as butterfly, and mosquitoes. And a beetle. Six legs. The insects are the largest group of animals. These are different kinds of antennas. So for a moth, they look very feathery, and a butterfly, they're more compact. Reptiles and amphibians. Seasonal positions of the Big Dipper. So the North Star is here, and it shows where it belongs in each setting. So during the winter, it will be in a more upright position, with the North Star being here. In the spring, it'll be an upside down dipper position. In the summer, it'll be more of a ladling position. And in the autumn or fall, it's more of a cup up position. The 5 polar constellations. You have the Big Dipper. There's the Dragon. I don't think I've ever learned the Dragon. Little Dipper. Cepheus. And Cassiopeia. If you're interested in rocks and minerals, you really have a choice of anything from jewels to curbstones. Under the name of minerals come such things as jewels, metals, and ores. A rock is a combination of 2 or more minerals. To make this clear, let us take the common rock known as granite. This rock is commonly made up of a combination of feldspar, quartz, and mica. Sometimes hornblende or augite is also present. All of these are minerals. To say a certain rock is granite is like saying that a certain tree is an oak. There are different kinds of granite, just as there are different kinds of oak trees. For instance, if the granite has a great deal of black mica, biotite, in it, the rock is known as biotite granite. hardness of a mineral is measured by how difficult it is to scratch. The cleavage means the structure of the mineral, which makes it break more easily in one direction than another. 3. Its specific gravity is found by comparing its weight with the weight of an equal volume of water. Its streak means its color when powdered. Its luster is the appearance of the surface due to reflected light, and its color means just what it says, the color. A homemade testing set to see how difficult a mineral is to scratch. You can use your fingernail, which indicates that it's very soft. A penny would make it's hard. Scratching it with a nail means it's even harder. A knife to scratch would be a very hard rock, and then having to use glass to scratch means it's a very hard mineral. Weather. Let's read a little bit about conservation. To conserve means to keep in a safe and sound condition. If you wanted to conserve your strength, it would mean that you would not spend it all at one time. If you were to keep a dress in good condition, it would mean that you would conserve it. To conserve our forests, waterways, soil, flowers, and animals means that we will use them carefully and keep them in sound condition. For instance, our forests must be replanted and kept free of forest fires in order to have forest for lumber, for recreation, and to have as homes for our plants and animals. If we are going to have rivers and lakes for recreation and for wildlife, we must do everything we can to keep them free of pollution. If we are going to have enough good soil in this country to raise the food we need, we must keep the topsoil on the land and replenish it with fertilizers. If we are going to have wildflowers and mammals and birds for the Girl Scouts and others to enjoy in the future, we must know what flowers, birds, and mammals need special protection. Conservation is a thing most of us can do something about. We can take care of the soil in our yards and gardens and in our camps. We can plant some of the things that birds and mammals need for shelter and food. We can refrain from picking wildflowers unless we know they are common. We can take special care not to start bonfires or campfires in dangerous places, and to see that all such fires are out before we leave them. We can try to learn as much as possible about the things out of doors, so we can know what things need special protection. You can get a great deal of information on conservation from your state forestry department and the state conservation department. In your community and camp, there must be many things you can do to practice conservation. Vacant lots, your yard, paths and camp and river and lake banks are places where you will find things to do. I hope you enjoyed taking another look at this Girl Scout